Cambridge Analytica scandal and its intersection with Facebook privacy policies and the 2016 presidential election. I just wanted to clarify that although Facebook is now named Meta, it was still Facebook at the time of the security issue, so I'll be calling it Facebook. To provide a brief summary, Cambridge Analytica, a UK-based political analytics firm, illegally obtained user data from a third-party Facebook app to create voter profiles. These voter profiles modeled users' personalities based on their wants and needs in the Big Five Personality Index, which measures agreeableness, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, and neuroticism. All of this information was compiled and used to surmise the likelihood that an individual would vote in a certain direction. These analytics were then allegedly and likely sold to Donald Trump's presidential campaign during the lead up to the 2016 election. Just to give you a feeling for where we're going with all of this, I'm going to cover the following 5 topics during the presentation. 1, why is this important to study? 2, how was the data obtained? 3, who was involved? 4, what were the consequences? And 5, where are we now? So why is this important to study? There are a ton of reasons why this is important to both generally know about and discuss in the context of this course. I've identified 3 primary reasons. First, and arguably foremost, it is important to consider whether the advantage that the Trump administration had in campaigning actually tipped the election in his favor. If it did, then this security issue literally changed the course of history. Obviously, it's impossible to know what the outcome of the election would have been without this interference, but it's certainly something to think about. Additionally, for maybe the first time, users became aware of how their data was actually being used. We're so used to agreeing to privacy policies without much thought, but this issue brought attention to Facebook's privacy policies specifically. People were made aware of the rights that they were signing away in exchange for simply existing on the platform. Lastly, it's crucial that we do not underestimate how much power social media has in the real world. It can be easy to view Facebook and other social networking sites as just a source of entertainment, but these channels allow for global communication that has real-life repercussions. Now, I want to talk about how all of this data was actually obtained. Alexander Kogan, pictured here on the right, is a scientist at the research conglomerate Global Science Research. In 2014, he created an app called This Is Your Digital Life that was housed on the Facebook platform and paid users to take a personality test. All participants were told that some of their public profile data would be parsed, but that all of their data was to be used exclusively in academic research. Kogan recruited over 270,000 participants. What these individuals didn't realize at the time is that Facebook's data privacy policies actually grant access to all user data in the context of academic research. Kogan's research evaluated some basic components of a user's profile, sure, but it also evaluated their likes, comments, location data, and other metrics of activity on the platform. More importantly, by consenting to participate in this research, users were also granting consent on behalf of all of their Facebook friends, whose same data could now be harvested and used in the research, even though they had never given their explicit consent. If this sounds unfair, that's because it kind of is, but everyone on Facebook was required to agree to this when they signed up for the platform, so theoretically, anyone knew this could happen. While only about 270,000 users gave consent to researchers, over 87 million profiles were eventually data mined because they were Facebook friends with a study participant. This little dot represents the 270,000 individuals who gave consent, and this large circle on the right is a to-size comparison of how many profiles were actually scraped for information. So far, all of the data collection and analysis up to this point, while admittedly shady, had been completely legal. So at what point did it become an actual issue of crime? The privacy policy which all users signed allows for data to be collected both internally and for third-party academic research exclusively. Once the data was sold for profit to Cambridge Analytica, the policy was violated. There are still debates to this day over whether the original data can even be considered sold. Cambridge Analytica did not pay directly for the user data. Rather, they paid Alexander Kogan to determine whether the data could be useful in political research. Once Kogan deemed that it could, Cambridge Analytica hired Kogan, and therefore also his data, to work for them. Zuckerberg maintains that when Facebook first learned that the data had been sold, they demanded and received assurance that this data had been deleted. Cambridge Analytica cites an entirely different timeline and narrative, claiming that Zuckerberg didn't request data deletion for years after he was made aware of the issue, only doing something about it when he received public backlash in the wake of the election. Cambridge Analytica actually still possesses at least some or maybe even all of this originally harvested data. Regardless, This Is Your Digital Life was removed as an app from Facebook and is no longer accessible to users. On the right, you can see the message that was shared with Facebook users, declaring that an app previously associated with Facebook had been removed from the platform because of data privacy issues. So we know that Cambridge Analytica purchased this raw user data and did some interesting things with it, but who actually are they? Cambridge Analytica is a London-based political analytics firm. Pictured on the left is Alexander Nix, the former CEO of the firm. Under Nix's leadership, Cambridge Analytica had been renowned for its psychological research useful in creating more specific, targeted marketing schemes in the political sphere. For example, the insights generated by the firm could help campaigns target areas where certain demographics were more prevalent and more likely to be swayed in a certain direction. Within the specific context of the Facebook data, Nix and company created personality profiles based on the raw user data obtained from This Is Your Digital Life. These personality profiles were used to create a subset of profiles that were identified as moderate voters or potential swing voters. On the right is an example profile generated by this type of data mining. Researchers would rate users on their needs, values, and some essential components of their personality. Based on these ratings, they could determine the likelihood that an individual would vote for a particular candidate, as well as whether they were likely to be swayed by marketing. These voter profiles were then allegedly sold to the Donald Trump presidential campaign so that more specific marketing could be carried out against these identified vulnerable voters. So, a lot of the controversy and unease stems from the fact that there is no clear consensus of who exactly was involved. The Trump campaign has always maintained that they did not purchase any data from Cambridge Analytica, only that they hired some of their data scientists to help with marketing. But these data scientists would have had access to this data, and many believe that there are just too many convenient links between the Trump administration and this data to rule out at least some interference. First, Steve Bannon, a former Trump aide, sat on the board of Cambridge Analytica during all of this and therefore had very easy access. Second, Robert Mercer, a right-wing millionaire, activist, and devoted Donald Trump supporter, is one of Cambridge Analytica's primary funders. On the Facebook side of things, there are definitely some inconsistencies in the narrative. Zuckerberg insists that when he first learned about the data breach in 2015, he requested that the data be deleted, and he was told that it had been. Kogan says this is not how it happened. He claims that he was not contacted by Zuckerberg at all until 2016, after the presidential election and after the voter profiles began garnering some publicity. Additionally, he says that only minor steps for deletion were requested. Under oath, Kogan said, quote, Facebook waited 2 years and did absolutely nothing to check that the data was deleted. All they asked me to do was tick a box on a form and send it back. There's also evidence that Facebook was aware of the security breach before Zuckerberg claims they learned about it. There are records of Facebook employees discussing Cambridge Analytica as early as September of 2015. Internal emails show concerns over, quote, clients in the political space, calling Cambridge Analytica, quote, a sketchy, to say the least, data modeling company. Essentially, Facebook knew about all of this as early as September of 2015, but did not publicly address any of it until March of 2018. There are innumerable consequences as the result of this scandal, but I will address only a few. First, Facebook faced a lot of public embarrassment and sanctions. They were fined about $650,000 by the UK Parliament. While this wasn't a whole lot of money, this incident did birth new, stricter regulations. For context, if Facebook were to commit the same crime now, their fine would have been worth well over $22 million. On American soil, Facebook was fined $5 billion by the FTC, sending a strong message to other tech giants about the repercussions for inadequate data security. Second, obviously, users also suffered as well. On the bright side, users were made more aware of what they were actually consenting to when they agreed to platforms' privacy policies. This also then forced platforms to both be more transparent about their data policies and provide users with more flexibility in how they would like to share their data. Even with all of these developments, users still don't really have control over their data. For example, Google still tracks users' locations even after location services have been turned off. Why? Users don't have the right to complete location privacy according to the policy that they signed. Even if users decided that they no longer wanted to be on any major platform, deleting their accounts wouldn't even be enough. All of their existing data would still remain. Third, some suspicious links between the 2016 US election and Russia were revealed. Records show that Cambridge Analytica made a similar pitch to a Russian oil company sanctioned by the US, known as Lukoil. Interestingly, this company was interested in the same voter data. This begs the question, why would Russians care about American voter data unless they were interested in having some sort of impact on our elections? This collaboration with Russia was kept very secret, even internally, yielding even more questions about the intentions behind this alliance. Lastly, the obvious. As we have already discussed before, this may have definitively transformed the outcome of the 2016 election. So, who should be held responsible for all of this? Alexander Kogan for intentionally violating Facebook's policies and infringing upon both a user's right to privacy and a country's right to a fair election. Alexander Nix for both illegally purchasing user data and illegally selling this data to the Trump campaign, or Mark Zuckerberg for being the source of the slimy data collection in the first place and for refusing to take remedial action until he faced public pressure. This was almost 6 years ago. Have things changed? Not really. In fact, the big data economy continues to grow. Currently, the market value of big data is estimated at about $272 billion. By 2029, experts believe this value will have more than doubled, predicting a value of about $655 billion. This promise of revenue is simply giving platforms even further motivation to continue harvesting user data and selling it for profit. It is likely that ethical concerns like this one will continue to plague platform developers, users, and all other sectors with which they interact. So my questions for the class are: 1, at what point did the data sharing first become illegal? And 2, what role did Cambridge Analytica play in this event? And here are my sources.